Dr. Phil's hand went up, not the usual "let me interject" gesture he uses when redirecting a conversation. This was different, firm, final. The kind of motion that makes cameras stop rolling and producers lean forward in their booths. Stop the tape. 2 words. That's all that took to freeze an entire studio. The audience, mid-gasp, went silent. The woman in the chair across from him, mascara streaking down her face, looked up. Her husband, sitting 3 feet away in the other guest chair, hadn't moved in what felt like minutes. He was staring at the envelope on the small table between them, the manila envelope, the one that had just changed everything. Dr. Phil turned away from the woman, away from the husband. He looked directly into camera, too, the one that feeds the live audience at home, and said, "We need a moment." Then he walked off stage. What you're about to witness is not a typical Dr. Phil episode. It's the moment a confession so shocking unfolded on live television that even Dr. Phil, a man who has seen it all, had to pause, regroup, and make a decision that no one in that room saw coming. It started 3 weeks earlier. A couple had written to the show. The letter was simple. "We need help saving our marriage." Standard intake. Happens hundreds of times a week. The producers flagged it, did the pre-in, booked them for a taping. Sarah and Mark, married 8 years, 2 kids, a house in the suburbs. From the outside, they looked like the kind of couple you'd see at a PDA meeting. But something was wrong. Mark had written the letter. He said his wife had been distant for months, coming home late, disappearing on weekends, refusing to explain where she'd been. "I just want the truth," Mark had said during his pre-in. "I don't even care what it is anymore. I just need to know." Sarah's pre-in was different. She was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that makes producers take notes. When asked if she was having an affair, she said, "It's more complicated than that." That phrase, "more complicated than that," is the kind of red flag that gets a show greenlit immediately. The taping was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Dr. Phil walked onto the stage at 9:47 a.m. as he always does. The audience applauded. He smiled, waved, and took his seat. Sarah and Mark were already sitting in the guest chairs on either side of the small table. On that table, a tissue box, 2 bottles of water, and the envelope. Dr. Phil opened with his signature directness. "Mark, you wrote to me because you believe your wife is living a double life. Sarah, you've admitted there's something you haven't told him, so let's not waste time. What's going on?" Sarah looked at Mark, then at Dr. Phil, then down at her hands. "I don't know where to start." "Start with the truth," Dr. Phil said. "That's always the best place." And that's when Sarah said it. The sentence that would become the most replayed clip of the entire season. "I've been living as someone else for the last 8 years." The audience gasped. Mark's face went pale. Dr. Phil leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and said, "Explain that." Sarah took a breath. "When I met Mark, I told him my name was Sarah Mitchell. I told him I grew up in Ohio. I told him my parents were dead. I told him I worked in marketing." She paused. "None of that is true." Mark stood up. "What are you talking about?" Dr. Phil raised a hand. "Mark, sit down. Let her finish." Mark sat, but his hands were shaking. Subscribe and leave a comment because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Sarah continued. "My real name is Jennifer. Jennifer Wallace. I grew up in Texas. My parents aren't dead. They disowned me when I was 22 because I stole money from them. A lot of money. I moved to a different state, changed my name legally, and started over. I met Mark 2 years later. He fell in love with Sarah. But Sarah doesn't exist. She never did." The silence in the studio was suffocating. Not the dramatic pause kind of silence. The kind of silence that happens when the air itself feels too heavy to move through. Dr. Phil didn't speak. He just looked at her, then at Mark, then back at her. "You've been lying to your husband for 8 years," Dr. Phil said slowly. "You lied about your name, your family, your entire past. You married him under a false identity?" "Yes. And he had no idea." "No," Mark's voice cracked. "We have kids, Sarah or Jennifer or whoever you are. We have kids." "I know. Do they even know their mother's real name?"
Sarah started crying. Not the delicate, single kind of crying you see in movies, the kind of crying that shakes your whole body. I wanted to tell you so many times, I just didn't know how. Dr. Phil stood up. He walked over to the small table, picked up the envelope, and held it in front of Sarah. This envelope was given to me by your parents, your real parents, Jennifer's parents. They saw the show announcement online. They've been looking for you for years. Sarah's eyes went wide. What? They want to see you. They're here backstage. The audience erupted, not in applause, in gasps, murmurs, a few audible, "Oh my God," reactions. Mark put his head in his hands. Sarah looked like she might pass out. And that's when Dr. Phil raised his hand and said, "Stop the tape." But what happened next, off camera, in the moments when the studio went dark and the crew stepped back, is something almost no one knows about, until now. Dr. Phil didn't leave the stage to take a break. He didn't walk off to collect his thoughts or consult with producers. He walked directly to Sarah, crouched down beside her chair, and spoke in a voice so low that only she, Mark, and a few nearby crew members could hear. "Jennifer," he said, using her real name for the first time, "you're not a bad person, but you've made a series of choices that have hurt people who love you, your husband, your kids, your parents. And the longer you keep running, the worse this gets." Sarah, tears streaming, nodded. "I'm going to bring your parents out here," Dr. Phil continued. "Not because I want to ambush you, but because this family, your real family, and the family you built, deserves a chance to heal. And healing starts with truth. All of it." "Right now?" Sarah whispered. "I'm scared." "I know you are," Dr. Phil said. "But you don't get to be scared anymore. You get to be brave for them." He gestured toward Mark, who was sitting motionless, staring at the floor. Dr. Phil stood, walked over to Mark, and put a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" Mark didn't look up. "No." "That's fair. But I need you to stay. Can you do that?" Mark nodded. Dr. Phil turned to the production team. "Bring them out." The cameras started rolling again. The audience, still buzzing with whispers, went silent as two people walked onto the stage. An older couple. The woman was in her 60s, silver hair pulled back, wearing a simple floral dress. The man beside her, tall and broad-shouldered, wore jeans and a button-up shirt. They looked nervous, hopeful, heartbroken. Jennifer looked up. The moment she saw them, she broke completely. She stood, stumbled forward, and collapsed into her mother's arms. The father joined the embrace, all three of them sobbing, the kind of crying that sounds like relief and grief mixed together. Mark watched from his chair. He didn't move, he didn't cry, he just watched. Dr. Phil let the moment happen.
He didn't interrupt, didn't speak, just stood off to the side, arms crossed, letting the family have what they needed. After what felt like 5 minutes, but was probably closer to 2, Dr. Phil stepped forward. "Jennifer, I want you to look at your husband." She turned. Her parents stepped back, but stayed close. "Mark has been sitting here, listening to the woman he married tell him that everything he thought he knew about her was a lie. And he's still here. Do you understand what that means?" Jennifer nodded, tears still falling. "It means he loves you. Not Sarah. You, Jennifer. The real you. But he can't love someone who won't let him see the truth. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Is there anything else? Anything you haven't told him?" Jennifer hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I have a daughter from before I met Mark. She's 14. I gave her up for adoption when I was 23. I've never told anyone." The audience gasped again. Mark closed his eyes. Jennifer's mother reached for her daughter's hand. Dr. Phil didn't flinch. "Does Mark know about this?" "No." "Does anyone?" "Just my parents and the adoption agency." Dr. Phil looked at Mark. "Mark, I'm going to give you a choice. You can walk out of here right now. No one would blame you. Or
You can stay here the rest and decide if this marriage is something you want to fight for. What do you want to do?" Mark opened his eyes. He looked at Jennifer, at her parents, at Dr. Phil. Then he said, "I want to stay." Dr. Phil nodded. "All right then, we're going to do this the right way." He turned to the camera. "We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to sit down, all of us, and we're going to figure out what healing looks like for this family." The show went to commercial, but backstage, in the moments between segments, Dr. Phil did something he rarely does. He sat down with Jennifer, Mark, and Jennifer's parents in a private room and facilitated a conversation that wasn't for television. No cameras, no audience, just people. He asked Jennifer to tell the whole story, start to finish, every lie, every omission, every reason she ran. And she did. It took 40 minutes. He asked Mark to say everything he was feeling. No filter, no politeness, just raw honesty. And Mark did. He talked about betrayal, about questioning every memory they'd ever made together, about not knowing if he could ever trust her again. He asked Jennifer's parents to explain why they disowned her. And they did. They admitted they'd been too harsh, too quick to judge. They said they'd spent years regretting it. And then Dr. Phil said something that no one in that room expected. "Jennifer, you're not going to fix this overnight, but you're going to start today. You're going to commit to therapy, individual and couples. You're going to meet with a legal advisor to address the name change and any other legal complications. You're going to reconnect with your daughter, if she's willing, and you're going to rebuild trust with your husband, one honest conversation at a time. This is going to take years, but it starts right now." He turned to Mark. "And you, Mark, you get to decide if you stay. But if you do, you're committing to the long road. Forgiveness isn't a one-time event. It's a daily choice. You don't have to make that choice today, but you do have to decide if you're willing to try." Mark looked at Jennifer. She looked back. "I'll try," he said. When the show came back from commercial, Dr. Phil walked back onto the stage with Jennifer, Mark, and her parents. The audience had no idea what had just happened in that back room, but they could see it. The shift, the exhaustion, the fragile hope. Dr. Phil sat down and addressed the camera. "What you've just witnessed is what happens when secrets become a way of life. Jennifer spent years running from her past, and in doing so, she built a life on a foundation of lies. But here's what I want you to understand. People don't lie because they're bad. They lie because they're scared. And fear, left unchecked, will destroy everything you love." He turned to Jennifer. "You have a long road ahead of you, but today you took the first step. You told the truth." He turned to Mark. "And you, Mark, you showed more courage in the last hour than most people show in a lifetime. You stayed. That matters." He turned to Jennifer's parents. "And you too. You came here not knowing if your daughter would even speak to you. That took guts. I respect that." The audience stood and applauded. Not the polite end-of-show applause, the standing ovation kind. The kind that says, "We see you. We're with you." Dr. Phil stood, shook Mark's hand, hugged Jennifer's parents, and gave Jennifer a long, steady look. "You got this," he said, "but only if you keep going." As the camera stopped rolling and the studio lights dimmed, Dr. Phil stayed on stage. He always does. He talks to the guests after the show ends, makes sure they have resources, contact information for therapists, follow-up plans. That day, he gave Jennifer the business card of a family therapist in her area. He gave Mark the number of a men's support group for partners dealing with betrayal. And he handed Jennifer's parents a referral to a counselor who specializes in family reconciliation. And then he told Jennifer, in front of everyone, the envelope your parents brought, it's not just about the past, it's about the future. You get to decide what that looks like, but you have to choose truth every single day. 6 months later, Dr. Phil received a letter. It was from Mark and Jennifer. They were still together, still in therapy, still fighting for their marriage. The letter included a photo. Mark, Jennifer, their 2 kids, and Jennifer's parents, all together, smiling. At the bottom of the letter, Jennifer had written, "You didn't just stop the tape that day. You stopped me from running. Thank you for making me stay." Dr. Phil keeps that letter in his office, not as a trophy, as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is pause, look someone in the eye, and refuse to let them hide anymore.